Hi there, I'm here today with Ian Alexander, and we're going to talk about the basic chain for mixing vocals, for a voiceover, and for a podcast. So Ian, what does it mean when someone says a basic chain?
So when we're talking about a chain, we tend to use certain few plugins to mix our vocal. It's important that you use them in a particular order as well, because some of the plugins will affect how the other ones behave.
Yeah.
So for example, I'd start off usually with noise gate, because then you can cut out any background noise, because sometimes like your computer might be humming, or there could be birds singing outside, which aren't very loud, but with a noise gate you can just cut them out completely in between when you're talking.
Yeah, we normally use the Waves NS1, but there are some good stock ones as well. We were editing some audio in Premiere Pro yesterday, and that's got a pretty good gate actually. So you don't always have to use the kind of paid third-party stuff. Sometimes the stock one is pretty decent.
Yeah, like even Logic's built-in gate, it may be a bit more confusing to use than the NS1, but it is just as good really. It just cuts out any noise in the background.
Yeah, especially if you're in an untreated room or a room, where you might have a laptop, there's a bit of a hum from the laptop. It can help with that. Sometimes if you've got your charger plugged into and a dongle, you can get a bit of a hum. I've noticed that I get that. And the gate just helps you get rid of that really.
Yeah, I'll almost always do that first, and then usually go on to EQ second. Some people might argue that it do compression first, but I like to use EQ first, because sometimes, for example, if you kicked a table or stamped on the floor, there's going to be like a low frequency rumble. If you EQ before the compression, you can cut that out, so the compressor doesn't actually react to the low frequency rumble. So yeah, I'll just use an EQ, usually cut out the bass up to around 120 hertz. Then every vocal's different, but generally a little bit of a cut in the mids at around 300 to 500 hertz.
Do you ever use a graphic EQ for doing this, or is it always parametric?
Pretty much just parametric EQ, because then you can choose exactly the frequency.
Yeah.
Some graphic ones are fine because you've got 32 bands, so each band is so close to the frequency you're after. But graphic tends to be easier, especially for a beginner, because you can actually see the waveform and see where the spikes in the audio spectrum are.
So would you rather use an EQ that adds a bit of flavour or colour, or would you rather have a transparent one?
Well,
test them out really and see which sounds better.
Yeah, most people won't have an EQ which colours the sound in a nice way. And also, if you're making a cut, it's not really going to colour the sound. But for example, something you might want to do is use parametric EQ to just make a couple of cuts where there's resonances in the voice, and then use an analog style EQ to make the boosts.
Yeah.
So I'd
often get a bit of colour in the boost, and
it's
no point adding colour to the cuts really.
Yeah, a good free one is Melda Production. They've got an EQ. It's parametric EQ, but it's just got saturation dial in there.
Nice.
So you can just add the saturation with that easily and choose the amount you want. But yeah, so when EQing, I'd usually cut out the bass, a small boost in the low frequencies, around 150 hertz, 200 hertz, just makes the voice sound a bit thicker, gives it more body. And then often a boost around 8 to 10K, just because that makes the voice sound a little bit more like present, just sounds a bit nicer and sort of more polished.
Yeah. Then you'd use a compressor, right?
Yeah, compression would usually go next.
Logic Pro's got decent stock compressor.
Yeah.
It is good.
You can use that for most things, because you've also got all the different types of
all the models, the one that's based on Focusrite and a few other ones.
When mixing vocals, I will, even for a podcast, I'll often use one of the analog model ones, just because it does give it's subtle, but if you use a bit of saturation in the EQ and in the compressor and in other stages, then all those things together help to make it sound better. But yeah, so I quite like the 1176 one's quite good, but it doesn't have as many options. So I'll often use the the sort of SSL bus style compressor.
The Waves one? Or?
No, I think they call it vintage VCA in Logic.
Oh, okay, cool.
But that one's I just quite like those ones. Or the red one. I think that's
the red one. I think that's the Focusrite one. I like that one.
Yeah, the Focusrite red. They're good.
So what settings would you have? How much ratio would you put on?
Well,
4:1, 5:1.
With vocal for a podcast or a voiceover or something, you're not always shouting and making a lot of noise. So
maybe if you're doing computer games.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. So a good starting point, I'd start with 4:1 because it's not going to suck all of the life out of your vocal, but it's going to keep it, it's going to keep it tamed reasonably well. It's not super severe, but yeah, if there is more variation in the dynamics in your voice, maybe go up to 5 or 6:1, as you say, for games, etc. But 4:1 seems to be a good starting point.
What about for attack and release?
Again, it depends on your vocal, but I like to start with a medium attack time of about 30 milliseconds because that just, it's not going to clamp down on the vocal too suddenly, so you lose all of the life of it. But it's fast enough that it's not going to, your voice isn't going to overpower at any certain points. Release, if you've got an auto setting on your compressor, I'd usually leave that on because for voiceovers, this does a really good job. Otherwise, I'd start somewhere, medium, about 150 milliseconds for release time.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that seems to work quite well. But yeah, all of these settings are kind of useless unless you've got the threshold set to the correct point. And obviously, I can't recommend a threshold point because it just depends how loud your audio is.
Yeah, it depends how loud you've recorded it.
Yeah, so
how loud you talk.
Yeah, so what I do is start off with those basic settings. So 4:1 ratio, attack time 30 milliseconds, release time on auto or about 150 milliseconds, and then bring down the threshold till you get up to about 6 decibels of gain reduction on your voice. Because then, your voice is still dynamic, but it's just tamed it a bit and it's, there's no really loud parts, no really quiet parts. And with that amount of gain reduction, yeah, you can use the makeup gain just to bring up the quieter parts so it's all a bit more level.
Yeah, that's a mistake a lot of people make is they don't use makeup gain
or they use too much.
Or they use too much makeup gain. The plugin's louder, and because it's louder, you automatically think it's better just because it's louder.
Yeah, so that's a good reason why you should apply your makeup gain and then bypass your plugin, like loop a little section, keep going back and forth, and just listen out. Then listen to see if it's any louder when you've got the compressor on. Because if your vocal's much louder, you're going to think, oh, it sounds better. So just try and get it balanced so it's about the same. So, in the average to loud parts of your voice, those bits are about as loud as when you don't have the compressor on.
Yeah.
Because then, obviously, if you go to a quieter section of the recording, it's always going to be louder because you've got the makeup gain. But when there's actually some gain reduction going on, you want it to be about the same volume.
Yeah, I do think compression's important for voiceovers. It just kind of gives you that radio tone as well when it's compressed. Obviously, don't over-compress it, or there's no dynamic range, but yeah.
One of the reasons you would add the gate before the compressor is because, talking about the makeup gain, when you turn up the makeup gain, if there's no gate before the compressor, the background noise...
Yeah, all that hum's going to be much louder.
Exactly, yeah. So if you were to use the gate after the compressor, then it's harder for the gate to tell whether it's background noise you're cutting out or a bit of your voice. And so, yeah, the gates behave better if you apply them before you've put the compression on because of that makeup gain.
Cool, and then you'd use a de-esser, right?
Yeah. Some people, they recommend using a de-esser before the compressor.
Yeah, I actually use a de-esser before and after. Two different types of de-essers.
Yeah, that can be a good way of doing it because when you use the compressor, the makeup gain, that brings up the quieter bits. So like the sibilance in your voice, that'll often come up a bit when you've got the makeup gain. So I like to do it afterwards. But what you can do is just do a little bit beforehand because then, the sibilance has been brought down a touch before compression. It can sound more natural that way, but I do tend to find I use the de-esser after compressor more often just because the sibilance is more obvious after you've applied the compressor. If you're applying the de-esser and you're having to use it quite severely and it's making your voice sound a bit weird, then maybe use less of it after the compressor and put one on before.
Yeah, if you use too much de-esser, it makes it sound like you've got a lisp.
It does indeed. It sounds really weird. Yeah.
Logic Pro's got a pretty good de-esser. De-esser 2. I didn't like de-esser 1.
That was a lot harder to use.
Yeah, that's a bit of messing about. But de-esser 2 is pretty simple to use. It's nice.
One thing, if you don't have a de-esser in your DAW, you can use a multiband compressor or a dynamic EQ.
I was going to say, what about TDR Nova?
Yeah, exactly. That's to set that up as de-esser, just set one band about 5K and then pull the threshold down. You can just use that to cut out those frequencies. So what de-esser is basically a compressor on a select band of frequencies.
Just a specific frequency, just kind of bringing it down, really, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, so then next, I guess that's all the plugins you'd use apart from a limiter and a meter, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, a limiter next.
Yeah, so the compressor will have made the audio slightly louder, just overall more compressed, so the quietest bits are louder. But the aim of the compressor isn't just to make that audio signal louder, it's just to reduce dynamic range. The limiter, we're just using that to make it louder. So I usually set the output level at -1 decibels, because if you set at minus 0.1, you can still sometimes get in-sample peaks, and it can clip after you've exported it. So it's just a safe place to leave it on -1. And then with the threshold or the gain control, I'll just increase that until you're getting more gain reduction from the limiter. I don't know, I won't get a massive amount of gain reduction, probably like 4 decibels at the loudest points on the limiter. But yeah, the main thing you've got to look out for is the overall volume, and that's where you use the metering.
Yeah, the meter. This is a big mistake I see all the time, especially for YouTube videos, is some of the videos are either really loud in the clipping or they're super quiet.
Yeah.
Just stick a meter on or just use a reference track.
Exactly.
Just kind of annoy me.
Yeah, so if you've got a plugin...
Waves have got a great one.
Yeah. So
actually, Premiere Pro's one's decent as well, we're exploring.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And there's some free ones out there as well. Or even if you don't want to download one, I think you can use... There's certain websites you can upload your file to, and they'll just analyze how loud it is. So if you don't have a plugin, you can do it online, but it's way easier with a plugin because you can do it in real time. You don't have to export and go and make changes again. So yeah, so
have it around like -14 to -18.
Yeah,
kind of LUFS.
Yeah, so it's different to a VU meter. It's an LUFS meter, and that's like the average loudness. It's also different to RMS. But yeah, if you can look up LUFS meters, use one of those and get it to around -14 to -18 LUFS. So to get it to that point, just increase the gain going into the limiter up until you get to that point.
That's for spoken word though. I think music's about -14.
Yeah. So yeah, you don't need to get it exactly bang on, -16. You just want it around the area. Or if you don't have one of these plugins, just listen to a podcast and just try and match your volume to that. Because, it doesn't really matter how much gain reduction there is in your limiter if it doesn't sound over compressed and you've got it at the right volume.
Obviously, people can turn the speakers up or down, but...
Yeah. But just listen to, like a YouTube video.
Yeah.
Put that on the full volume on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then listen to that. Then play your session in Logic or whatever DAW you're using and just listen out to see if it's about the same volume. So they're most of the processes that I would use. Occasionally, though, you might have a humming or a hissing noise or some sort of background sound that your noise gate couldn't cut out. If this happens, I'd often use some sort of noise reduction plugin.
X noise or something.
Yeah, Waves have some of those. But again, Premiere Pro, they had, I can't remember what it was called, but they've got a plugin, like a denoiser. I think it's called denoiser, but that just reduces background sounds. Be careful when using those, because if you add too much of the reduction, it starts sort of pulling out the frequencies of your voice and can sound really weird, and it can sort of sound like you're kind of underwater. So just try and get it to a balance between, cutting out enough of the background sounds, but not affecting your vocals in a negative way.
It depends on what the background sound is as well. If it's just one frequency or 2 frequencies, you could get rid of that with the EQ.
Yeah. If there was just like a really a thin bandwidth humming sound.
A sine wave.
Well, yeah. We've done that before for examples, teaching people how to EQ. Yeah. If there is just one tone and it's, not ringing out across the frequency spectrum, you can just find that tone and EQ it out. But again, use the noise reduction before you apply the compression. That usually helps. It's
also important to record some room sound. So if you're just talking non-stop, it's quite difficult to find that bit. Because what X noise does, it kind of records that sound and then scoops it out. So if you do a recording, just pause for 10 seconds or 5 seconds. So then you've got some room sound.
Leave it rolling.
Yeah, because it's quite hard to find the exact frequency or the exact tone when you've got the voice speaking at the same time.
Yeah. So if you are recording and you can tell it's noisy in there, leave the microphone recording for a moment or two, because then with X noise, for example, you can use that bit of audio so it can analyze it.
Some stuff is fixable. We've fixed quite a lot of noisy audio.
Yeah.
Now and again, you just have to realize the recording wasn't very good and you have to do it again.
Yes. So, I've tried to fix audio files for people before when they've done an interview in a coffee shop, for example.
Yeah.
And when in a coffee shop, if someone's steaming milk, it is really loud. And
so many different frequencies as well.
Yeah, cutting that out
Yes.
is just sometimes impossible.
Yeah.
So you've always got to be mindful of, where you are doing your recording. It does happen occasionally where you do have to sack off recording and, start a project again, which really sucks. But, if you follow all those processes that we've talked about, then it's going to give you your best chance of salvaging it.
You do, however, get some multi-process plugins for vocals. I know Premiere Pro have got the vocal enhancer. Waves have got the CLA vocal, which has like a built-in compressor and EQ and a few other things as well. So they can be quite useful.
Yeah, they are good. They can be really handy if you're in a hurry or you don't need something to be super high quality. Sometimes you can just stick it on and see how it sounds, along with the other processes that you've applied.
Yeah.
They are good, they are quick, but really I'd recommend just practicing going through these processes because it gives you more flexibility. You can control all the settings on the compressor. You can choose which frequencies you're EQing quite, very specifically. Those ones are really handy and they do have a place, but I'd always recommend just practicing, actually mixing with the individual plugins. Cause,
a lot of trial and error, and I hate to say it, geeking up and studying.
Yeah.
You do get presets. You can start off with presets and tweak from there, but a lot of time it's just better to learn the fundamentals.
Yeah. It's like, we've recommended these different EQ boosts and cuts and compression settings. With those, you've got to take it with a pinch of salt because everything you work on does need processing slightly differently. So they're good starting places, but, that's where you should start and then just keep doing it and you'll learn what works better in certain situations. Obviously, applying this processing, as we've just mentioned, will make your audio sound better, but you can make it sound even better than that once you've practiced it. So
yeah, and everyone's voice is different as well. So if we give you a preset and you copy our chain, it might not.
Yeah,
depends what microphone you use, what audio interface you're recording to, who spoke, what room you're in. Yeah, all those.
There's loads of things.
Yeah,
but yeah, so the main processes that I'd recommend you going through are using a gate, adding an EQ, using compression, de-esser, and then limiting.
What about adding gain before all this?
Well,
so if you record too quiet.
Yeah, if your recording was too quiet.
Yeah. It's not really gonna act the same if.
Yeah. So for example, if you're processing your vocals and you're using a compressor and you've got threshold all the way to its lowest point and you're still not really getting any gain reduction, it just means your recording is way too quiet. If that's the case, it can sometimes be worth re-recording it, but you can always use a gain plugin in your DAW just to make it louder. So do that before you apply any other processing. It's like we were talking about saturation before. If your audio signal is too quiet going to the compressor or the EQ, then it's not going to saturate the same way as it would if it was louder. So yeah, adding gain is important earlier on if your signal isn't at a decent level.
Yeah, I'd say make sure your signal's at a decent level first because, using the gain on your audio interface is generally going to sound better than using the digital gain.
Yeah, this is, it's kind of basics. You need to know how to gain stage properly and record audio. So don't skip the basics, just learn that first.
I've had a few people send me audio files before and it's recorded on the phone. Like, can you make this sound great? Nope.
Yeah.
Not really.
You can make it sound a little better, but
slightly less worse, but
yeah. If you're going to be mixing something for a podcast, try and use a microphone if possible. A USB mic, you can get them really cheap.
58.
Yeah, 58 in an interface, they're good. There's so many cheap professional microphones you can get, which will sound.
Rode have got some good stuff now.
Yeah.
Rode have actually got this kind of all-in-one podcast equipment. Have you seen that? You can record all into this one little box.
Oh, yeah.
And you can apply all the processing on there. So you don't actually need to use a DAW or a laptop. You probably can't sculpt the sound as much as you want in that, but still looks pretty good.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned is all the processes we've talked about here, they sound really, some of them may sound really professional. You might be thinking, oh, I don't have any of these plugins, but there's plenty of free software out there which will give you a lot of good plugins for mixing audio. And there's also some software which allows you to use third-party plugins. So, you can get free pieces of software such as OBS and then use free third-party plugins, so you can get a really good quality compressor, a really good quality EQ, limiter, etc., and use them all in this free piece of software. And all these plugins I'm talking about that are free, this is all legal. No one has to illegally try and download anything, because I know lots of people try and do that. But there is a lot of software out there which is free and is really good. Like even when I'm mastering, I very regularly use TDR Nova. And, there's a free version of that, which is almost the same as a full paid version.
Yeah, there is certain subscription models as well. I know Studio One is currently on Splice, and you can get Adobe Audition through Creative Cloud.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to buy it all in one go, there are some kind of rent to own or subscriptions you can use as well.
Yeah. One thing
because generally speaking, Studio One Professional and Adobe Audition is going to be better than Audacity.
Yes, yeah.
For example.
Yeah, Audacity's popular because it's free and it's been around for a long time and it's open source. But I find it's a lot more awkward to use than, for example, Logic or Pro Tools. Yeah. So if you pay, if you're willing to spend money, it's going to make your life easier when it comes to mixing audio. But if you don't have a lot of cash, there is ways you can do it for free and you can still get really good results.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered it. So what he talks about in this, gain, gate, EQ, compression, de-essing, limiting, metering.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole shebang.
Yeah, and sort of background noise reduction as well.
But yeah, it's important to get a decent high quality recording before you mix it as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Like if you're recording in a huge, massive church, there's going to be reverb.
Yeah. For example, while we're having this chat now, we're sat in a room which did sound worse than this earlier, but we just put some soft items around the room, like cushions. We've got the sofas in here. We've even got a couple of acoustic panels just lying on the floor, just because, if you're in a really, really lively sounding room, it's not going to sound as good as in a slightly treated
wooden floors as well, hard surfaces.
Yeah, this room sounds particularly bad without any treatment. Yeah. So, if we were recording it in, your studio, this wouldn't have been necessary. But
anyway, that's the audio processing chat.
Yep.
Cool.
For podcasts, not for music.
Yeah, this is for podcasts, mixing voiceovers, that kind of thing. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you found this video useful. If you liked it, remember to hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, remember to subscribe. And we'll talk to you soon.